Xers really, more than anything else, represent a generation of extreme individual creativity and resilience. After 9/11, everyone was talking about the resilience of America. Which generation do you think really showed that resilience? I don't think boomers. I think it's the "who moved my cheese" generation. I think it's Generation X. I mean, who was most likely in those Twin Towers at that hour of the morning? Who was in that flight from Pittsburgh? Who was in that wing of the Pentagon? Who was shipping out a couple of weeks later to Afghanistan, getting married, signing their wills? This is Generation X. It can take anything you give it. Like sound bites. Sound bites provide accountability. Notice the constant appearance today in the young adult pop culture of words like reality, survivor. It says something about this generation's persona. It says something about kind of how they feel they have to experience life and deal with life. Generations in the workplace, coming of age initiation, long boom and culture wars, maximum individualism, small and simple. Get rid of the subtext. It's just a job. It's not a career, right?
Called Generation X, the millions of young Americans who are the 20-somethings, younger than baby boomers and yuppies, not quite 30-something. Trying to define them as they define themselves has become a preoccupation because they clearly are a major force in American society and in the workplace. Generation X, our subject for the next several nights. Tonight we begin with NBC's Dawn Fratangelo.
David Mark Cohen.
It should be the best time of their lives, but today's young people graduate wearing a negative label before they've had a chance to make their own mark.
Sociologists call you Generation X. But I believe that giving up is a grave and tragic error.
Generation X, born from 1961 to 81, the generation after the affluent, socially conscious baby boomers. The lost generation, it's called.
They think we're lost, but we're just trying to find something better and new.
Television portrays the generation as this dysfunctional group that lives at Melrose Place. At the movies, Xers find reality bites in a world of too much education and too few jobs.
Mr. Spears, do you have any idea what it means to be a cashier at Wiener Schnitzel?
Yeah, it's taking orders and making change.
4 years ago, an author labeled the generation X, and it stuck. Add to that a slew of publications with terms like slacker and 20-nothings, and you get the feeling the nearly 80 million in the generation have no ambition and lots of time to watch MTV.
I don't think we're sitting around bitching and moaning also, which is a big perception that you see on talk shows.
You get a much more clear, much more comprehensive sense of who we are as a generation.
I'm not interested in blending in and getting as much money as possible.
A lot of our parents discovered that it wasn't right, so I don't think any of us expect that it'll be right the first time.
With no big revolution to unite them like the boomers had during the 60s, those of Generation X must focus on smaller, important conquests, like repairing the economy and broken families.
They're not out there trying to save the world as a group. They're out there trying to do individual acts of generosity.
If Generation X can accomplish those things, many believe it will be one of the most influential in history.
I enjoy being able to get up every morning, do my own thing, wear shorts around if I want to do that, and really live life the way I want to rather than the way my boss feels I ought to.
For many, that also means getting involved in causes.
People in our generation, the so-called 20-something generation, volunteer at twice the rate that people in the baby boom generation volunteered when they were our age.
You run family, not as many workaholics in this group. It's a generation that is profoundly resentful of a government that has saddled it with a $4.5 trillion national debt and spends 10 times as much on retirees as it does on babies. And of a corporate America that has torn up the old social contract that said you do right by me and I'll do right by you. For America Close Up.
Such a bust that Subaru changed ad agencies. It's already a legend among ad people.
You're making a very grave mistake if you're trying to make broad assumptions about the psyche of an entire generation. And that's exactly what Subaru did in this ad.
Chrysler, on the other hand, hit pay dirt with its neon ad, which stressed simplicity and price. This ad launched orders for almost 200,000 cars.
Say hello to neon. We're being approached as a segment of people to market to advertise to. And what we actually are is a group of people that are immune to advertising.
Immune to advertising? Well, certainly wise to it. By the time he or she has finished high school, an average American kid has watched 350,000 television commercials, 1/3
We speak and understand the language of media as natives rather than as immigrants.
Up there in the adult world during their formative years, Gen Xers are also developing another powerful set of unique core values that in many ways are toughening them in the right way for the adulthood that awaits. They're growing up to be pretty unimpressed with authority, kind of cynical towards older generations, distrustful of our nation's major institutions, and in 180-degree contrast to the older boomers, and as we will learn in another decade, the younger millennials, Xers are developing core values of disempowerment, and with disempowerment, its inevitable twin core value, disengagement. All around them, as they come of age, the adult world is failing to deliver on its promise, regularly lying and cheating and getting caught at it. Take the biggest institution of all, the federal government of the United States of America. Here is the only government of the United States that Generation X will know as it passes through its formative years and molds lifelong core values. 1973, the oldest Xers turn 8. Their parents tell them one night the vice president of our nation just resigned in scandal. 1 year later, 1974, the first Xers turn 9. Their parents tell them one night the president of our nation just resigned in scandal. 1 year later, 1975, first Xers turn 10. Their parents tell them one night our government has decided to quit a war in Southeast Asia. 4 years later, 1979, first Xers turn 14. They joined the rest of the nation in a 444-day count of Americans held hopelessly hostage by activists in Iran. 1 year later, 1980, first Xers turned 15. They share the national embarrassment of a failed attempt by their government to rescue those hostages. 1983 through 1988, and especially in 1986, as students, they will discuss the daily playing out of the Iran-Contra scandal. And on January 28, 1986, I dare say every one of you Xers in this theater and at home, remember where you were when you learned that the Challenger space shuttle had just exploded. And the Xer experience with their nation's government will continue into the 90s. With President Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and political campaign tactics, in which campaign strategists are now going to spend those hundreds of millions of advertising dollars not on educating we, the people, about their candidates' qualifications and beliefs, but instead using that money to attack the opponent at all costs, often inaccurately and often unethically. And that's the government of the United States of America to Generation X. And so these kinds of formative years experiences will cement in Gen X strong core values of distrust of my government, and with that distrust, the inevitable disinterest in government. And to this day, that core value shows up with that, and until very recently, a lack of interest in voting in elections.